Hey, I made an hour-long video yesterday. Probably don't want to sit through that, so I'm going to make a very quick one demonstrating how to load external theaters in graphics. Theaters, of course, being like maps or levels. Now, I am using Windows again, but this time it's for a actual good reason, because I assume most people are going to be using Windows. Now, the process is the same on Linux, but, you know, just wanted it to look more friendly for people who don't use Linux. I'll be starting from scratch. That means going here to the GitHub page, the latest release, Alpha 5, and downloading the executable. There we go. Okay, so here we go. This is, I'm going to put this on the desktop actually. There we go. So it's nice and clean. Make a new folder. So you want to make you want to make a theaters folder like this and have it be in the same directory as the executable. So can't be here, has to be here, right next to it. In this is where you're going to make your theater files. Now, theater files, their name, the file name is very important, at least the beginning of it. They start with a number, and the number is basically the load order. Graphics will replace, it currently has two embedded theaters, Theater 0 and Theater 1. It will replace those if you make, let's say, 0.something.gt. This will replace the first theater that's in the engine right now. And so it will load this instead of that. So this is something that you can do, but if you don't want to replace them, you can just make it 10 or 2 or 51, and it will just get the next one that is up next. So I'm gonna make 2.something.gt because 2 would be what's up next, and you know I like to be like that. And then I'll give it a random name. Now the name in the file, like the file name right here, doesn't actually matter. That's not really going to be read or anything. The name of the theater is actually like set in the file, and I'll show you that in a second. So let me just make this, I'll just name it something. Let me open up Sublime Text. Let me make a new window. All right. So here is an empty file. Now, theater files have to start with the name of the theater, and the way that you do this is you designate it with an @ so @ and then the name of your theater. I'm going to name it "This is a theater" or something. Now you can, I think, use white space, but I would recommend not using white space, and white space is spaces or tabs or, like, you know, returns. It's just, I haven't really written the parser to account for that, but it shouldn't, like, it might work, but I'm not too sure. So, you know, use white space at your own risk, or just don't. Now, I am going into the red a little bit. I'm going to turn the microphone down by like 1.5 decibels. It's not that much. I'll just move it away. Now, after this, you can start making your theater. There is one thing that you have to include, or the game might crash, and that is the player. Graphics player. So every time you make an object, I will upload, probably in the documentation, a list of like all the like C++ variables and stuff like that you can reference in here, because I'm thinking about how I'm going to demo this, and I'm like, oh, you kind of have to go into the code and look for that right now, which is a little annoying, and I'm sorry. I'll add that to the documentation. But graphics player is the player class. Give it a name. I'll just name it player. Curly brackets, and now we're gonna give the player some variables. What do I want to tell the player, to give the player? Well, let's take a look at the theater files that I have in the game engine. Let's take a look at this one, the Hello World Theater. The player is somewhere down here. Yeah, there we go. I've set the position and the movement speed and the movement acceleration. I think these are the default values though, like in the C++ code. If they weren't there, it would be the same, I think. I'm just gonna copy these. Whoop. Oh, that's right. Copy these in here. You also don't have to line these up, by the way. I just do it to make it look pretty, but you can just like, you know, there should be a space, but that's it. You also should add a light flashlight. I believe that's how you spell it. Yes. Give it a name. Doesn't have to have anything in the brackets. But yeah, because the engine right now, because, you know, debugging and showing off features, assumes there will be a flashlight there. Now, it won't crash, but like, you know, why not? Just put a flashlight in. And then you can add things like I would recommend for floors and walls and things that don't move but need to have collision, a static body actor, because this will make its own cube collider that matches the shape and the position and the rotation of the actor. Name it floor, and we'll give it a scale of 100, 0, or 1 actually, 100. And these numbers, by the way, when you do number variables, they don't have to be floats. But if one of them is a float, then all of them will be turned into floats. Because it favors floats, because these are mainly when you're inputting like vectors like this. It's mainly for GLM vectors for the position, rotation, and stuff, and those need to be floats. So that's why I just make these floats. And oh yeah, and I can show off some fun stuff like let's make a mesh above this actor, because I'm going to be using it in the actor. And if you want to use something you've made in another thing, well, that first thing has to be made first. So above this actor, let's call it floor, or I'm sorry, not the mesh. The mesh is just a mesh. It's a cube. We'll say mesh data. I think it's just, and this is the part where you do have to look in the code. And again, I will try to put this on the documentation very soon, so you don't have to do this. You can just look at the documentation. But if we go to, it is in the interpreter, right here. Graphics cube. There we go. Graphics cube. Or you could also just look at the one of the two theaters I've already made in the game, and yeah. The material. Here we go. In this one, floor material. And you can change the color or the texture or whatever of any mesh, and I'll show you how to do this. So I will say diffuse texture. I believe that's what it is. Yes, it is. Let's give it I have a source engine, or it's made to look like a source engine dev texture. It's not really one, but I do have one, source light gray, and I have been liking this one. Specular strength 0, because I don't have a specular map for specular texture for that texture, and it does look kind of weird and funky, a bit too shiny. So turn off the specular, and then I can actually set the color, and because this is a gray texture, the color really does come through nicely. So for instance, I can make this very green. There we go. And finally, in the static body actor, I can say mesh cube. That'll set the mesh to be the cube. But I want the cube to have the floor material. How do I do that? Well, do I have to move this cube down here and then, whoops, say material, floor material? Well, yeah, you could do that. But then what if I wanted something else to use the cube mesh? Well, now it's stuck using that material. There's a better way. Boom. I have now given the floor the cube mesh, but with the floor material. In the code, it actually makes a copy of that cube mesh and then gives that copy that material. But this is a nice shorthand and makes it so you don't have to do all that work every single time. Because now, what I can do is I can copy this, and I can make a wall. I'll make it 50 by 100 by 30. And then I'll set its position to be 75, 100, 20. And I'll make this a cube, but look at this. I don't want to use the floor material. I'll make a new one. Material, and I'll call this one Doom Material, because I have a little Doom texture in here. Oops. Well, I mean, that's fine, but I like to make it look like this. Okay, diffuse texture, Doom, what was it again? Yeah, Doom texture diff, specular texture, Doom texture, what? Specular strength, 1.0, that's a little bit bright, 0.8, specular sharpness, I think it is. That's not going to be there, but I do think it's specular sharpness. I can double check here. Yeah, 32. And then Doom Material. By the way, when you're naming these things, you should give them all unique names. If they have the same name as each other, there could be problems. I don't think anything should crash, except for well, no, the flashlight won't crash. But like, it's just, you really should make them unique names. And let's add some lights. Right now it's just the flashlight. Let's add some lights. I have the generic lights, like light is a point light, and then spotlight and direction light, or directional light. It's light, directional, light, spot. But I also have light tester mover. I believe that's what it is. Let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, light tester mover. Spinny light. I'm just going to copy in some of the data here, actually. Pivot position, pivot radius, pivot speed. It is a spinning light. Pivot position, pivot radius, pivot speed, and then the color. And let's add a light directional. I'll just name it fake sun. And then we'll give it a color. Well, actually, let's leave it default, because default values are fine for that. And then let's add a rigid body actor. Falling cube. Let's set the position to be right in front of us. High up and a little far away. Let's set the rotation a little bit so that it has a nice unique falling. It's not just straight down, you know, like it will be straight down, but it'll be at an angle. Let's say 25, negative 5, 16.4, I don't know. And then the collider, well, let's go back up here and make a collider. Collider, falling, collider 1. And I will look up here again. Motion type, dynamic, because this is a moving object. Object layer, moving, because this is a moving object. Activation, activate, I believe. Yes. And then shape, box shape. All of the things that you would write in these square brackets, you will find right here in T-interpreter. And these directly correlate to actual variables in the C++ code. So as you can see, dynamic correlates to JPH, emotion type, dynamic. Oh, and ignore these errors. It's because I haven't configured the ClangD, and they're fake errors, basically. Collider, angled brackets, whoops, falling, collider 1. And now, if all goes well, this should work. the debug menu. Currently loaded theater, hello world theater. The next one, collision testing. And the next one, this is a theater or something. And look at that, the cube fell. Look at that. It does look a little funky. And I think it's because I didn't set some things. Right. I didn't give the rigid body actor a scale or property, and I think that makes the collider act a little funky. Let's see. Ah, no, it doesn't. Interesting. All right, you know what? Actually, it's not acting funky. It's yeah, it's because it's rotated in a weird way. Yeah, so it's just falling strangely. Yeah, okay. Because if I copy like these and paste them in here, whoops. Oh, yep. It crashed because I copy and pasted in some stuff from another file that are referencing things that don't exist. Doom Shiny and Doom Dull, those materials don't exist. So now you know. Yeah, there we go. Oh, look at that, yeah. Oh, you know why it's like that? My bad. It's, I think it's because of the material that I'm using. Let's see here. Oh, I didn't give it a mesh or a material. It's not the material. I didn't give it a mesh or a material. Duh. The default mesh is a tiny cube, and the default material is bright white. My bad. Cube. Let's give it the floor material. Oh, and I quit graphics, so you don't get to. Well, you did kind of see it, but like, yeah, it does do it. It does like save your changes. You don't have to close the window. Like, watch this. If I change this to be the Doom material, look at that. And you can see here, falling collider, Doom material, floor material. You can see all the things here if you hit tab. Look at that. So, yeah. Oh, by the way I've programmed the game engine to detect the flashlight is kind of stupid. You won't be able to turn the flashlight on or off or change its color unless you give it the name player flashlight, like this. And I will fix that and change that later. It's that I forgot about that. That's like a debug thing. The way I'm like getting the flashlight and letting you activate it and stuff is not how I want to keep doing it anyway. So it's all going to change. But like now you can see I was hitting the button, but it wasn't changing, but now it is. So you do have to do that. Sorry. And yeah. Also this light, you can't see it, and I think it's because the strength isn't turned up, but you can affect the strength and the intensity of lights with a variable. Because obviously, as you can see in these ones, the lights are affecting the, yeah, you can see that right there. They are having an effect, but like you can see the blue light doesn't really have a big effect on the ground, and that's because it's too high up, because the intensity isn't cranked up. Anyway, that is how you can do that. Make a custom theater, load it in. Not much that you can do with that, but you can do that. So, yeah, hope you found this informative.